country in search of stories of interest. Kentucky town that's undergone a renaissance. A town named for a cave.
There are places in Kentucky where science goes quiet, where ancient stones whisper languages no one can read, hills pulse with an underground heartbeat, and caves echo words no one ever said.
It's one of the largest stones here, at around 6 tons. The big question is how on earth it was transported from northeast Scotland.
From forbidden glyphs and vanishing monoliths to landforms shaped like sleeping giants. Something is happening deep in the Appalachian shadows that textbooks won't touch. So the real question is, why does everything strange keep happening in Kentucky? And why is no one allowed to talk about it? The Redbird Petroglyph, Kentucky's 8,000-year-old script no one can read. There's an unsettling moment people describe when they first see the Redbird Petroglyph up close. It's not fear, it's recognition. Not because they understand the symbols carved into the sprawling sandstone face, but because they feel the intention behind them. These aren't random scratches. They're deliberate strokes from a culture that existed thousands of years before the first mound builders, long before written history touched North America. Archaeologists estimate portions of the stone could be up to 8,000 years old, making it one of the oldest carved surfaces on the continent. The petroglyph was originally discovered in Clay County, Kentucky, etched into a massive 15-ton boulder that had balanced on a roadside cliff for centuries. Locals called it the Redbird Rock, named after a Cherokee leader, though the carvings themselves predate Cherokee occupation by millennia. In February 1994, after heavy rainfall loosened the soil, the huge stone broke loose and rolled onto the highway. When researchers and locals inspected it, they realized the fall had exposed new carvings no one had ever seen before, revealing intricate spirals, grids, and anthropomorphic shapes that had been hidden for hundreds. The most famous and most controversial aspect of the stone is that some markings appear similar to Old World scripts. In early documentation, scholars proposed comparisons to Ogham, Phoenician Iberian, and even Libyan Berber writing. None of those matches are confirmed, but the resemblance is uncanny enough that the conversation has never ended. Did ancient travelers from across the ocean reach Kentucky long before recorded European contact? Mainstream archaeologists say no. Yet the stone sits there, stubbornly silent, carved in a way that no modern tribe fully claims, and no expert can translate. And here's the strangest part: the symbols aren't uniform. Some appear deeply weathered, almost melted into the rock, suggesting immense age. Others are sharp, suggesting newer hands carved over older ones. This indicates the boulder was a multi-generational carving surface, used by different cultures across different eras, like a prehistoric bulletin board spanning centuries. Imagine a single rock holding a time-lapse conversation between peoples who never met each other. When the boulder was eventually relocated for preservation, three-dimensional scans revealed something that still puzzles researchers. Several symbols are perfectly aligned with the sunrise during the winter solstice. This kind of astronomical precision suggests the stone wasn't just art. It may have been a calendar, a ritual marker, or even a record of seasonal cycles long before documented calendars existed in North America. The sleeping giant beneath the Cumberland Plateau. There's a quiet stretch of highland forest that runs along the edge of the Cumberland Plateau in southeastern Kentucky. Most people drive right past it without a second glance. But if you look at aerial photos taken during certain times of year, when the leaves have fallen and the low sun casts long shadows, something strange begins to appear. A shape, a silhouette, a massive reclining figure etched into the contours of the land itself. Locals call it the sleeping giant, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. The giant isn't a statue or carving. It's a natural landform shaped by erosion, folds in the bedrock, and shifts over millions of years. But here's where it gets eerie. The formation aligns almost too perfectly. The head has a pronounced chin and nose, the chest rises gently, and the legs slope down in parallel ridges. From above, it looks like a giant man lying flat on his back. arms crossed, facing the sky. Geologists chalk it up to coincidence, but for centuries Appalachian oral traditions have whispered something else. According to some Cherokee elders, the plateau is the final resting place of a powerful being. Not a god, not a man, but something in between. A watcher, they say, who once walked the land before humans arrived. He laid down to sleep, and the earth covered him like a blanket. In some variations of the tale, he was put there on purpose, to guard something buried deep inside the mountains. And it's not just stories. In 1971, a University of Kentucky geology student found a series of unusually symmetrical indentations inside a limestone outcrop just below the chest of the giant. He recorded their spacing and depth, noting that they were unlike any known natural weathering pattern in the region. The data was shelved, never formally published. But the notes still circulate online, feeding speculation that the so-called sleeping giant might not just be a landform, but the casing of something buried. Modern LiDAR scans of the region have revealed a series of linear subsurface anomalies, long rectangular shapes hundreds of feet beneath the surface that seem too regular to be natural faulting. They're buried deep, inaccessible without expensive drilling, and no one has ever gone that far to investigate. The echo walls of Carter Caves sound that shouldn't exist. Hidden beneath the forests of eastern Kentucky lies Carter Caves State Park, a region known for its winding tunnels, underground rivers, and cathedral-like chambers carved out of limestone over millions of years.
Oh, we really have, and our last visit was right down the road, not too far, at Carter Caves, and it was a great time. We had a wonderful time with the boys. Go ahead and take a look.
But ask the locals, especially those who've worked in the caves for years, and you'll hear a different kind of story. Not about what you see down there, but about what you hear. There's one chamber in particular, unofficially called the Whisper Vault, where sound doesn't behave like it should. When visitors stand inside and speak, their voices echo, not once, but in layers. Words seem to repeat themselves 2 or 3 seconds after being spoken, even when there's no nearby surface to reflect the sound. In some cases, people have claimed to hear echoes of conversations they never had. Stray phrases, laughter, even the faint sound of footsteps in tunnels that are, according to park maps, completely sealed off. Geologists say the cave's acoustics are complex and poorly understood. Water channels and wind pockets can create unpredictable sound tunnels. But that doesn't explain recordings made in the 1980s by researchers from the University of Louisville. In one documented experiment, a team placed directional microphones in the chamber while a speaker read a prepared script. When they reviewed the tapes later, they found additional words, soft, unintelligible but real, layered over the original audio. The cave was empty except for the test crew. The anomaly has never been explained. And then there's the lore. Long before this became a park, Shawnee elders referred to the area as the mouth that remembers. Early European settlers wrote about caves where prayers came back to you twice, often distorted, as if the cave was answering in its own voice. Some Appalachian legends even claim the cave can store sound, replaying moments from the past like an underground phonograph, especially after storms, or on nights when the barometric pressure drops sharply. There are theories, of course. Some believe it's just atmospheric acoustics. Others argue that natural magnetic fields interacting with the rock could influence audio signals. But a growing fringe theory suggests something even stranger, that the cave structure itself may act like a giant resonating archive, unintentionally recording human sound over centuries and releasing it under the right conditions. It's a wild idea, sure, but the phenomenon has now been recorded in 3 separate locations within Carter Caves and nowhere else in Kentucky. The Forbidden Stones of Pine Mountain, carvings. No one is allowed to study. Deep in southeastern Kentucky, near the rugged forested spine of Pine Mountain, there's a slope that many locals simply call the place the surveys skip. It's not on any tourist trail. You won't find it on an official archaeological registry. But in whispers and old miner maps, It's marked by a simple phrase: Glyph field, do not enter. And the warnings, strangely enough, didn't come from tribes or tourists. They came from government land contractors in the 1960s. It started with a coal exploration team in 1967. They were cutting seismic lines through an unlogged patch of Pine Mountain when they stumbled on what they believed was an unusually flat outcrop of sandstone. But under the dirt and lichen, they found more than rock. Dozens of markings, some linear, some curving, and others eerily similar to tally marks or mathematical notations, were etched across a 40-foot section of stone facing due east.
So you have to have a couple of big paw pad footprints. You've got something here with a spiral, then it hooks into another.
Photographs were taken, samples were scraped. But within weeks, the entire survey project was halted. The official report cited unstable terrain. But two members of the original crew, who later spoke anonymously to a regional historian, described something different. They were told to stop digging and never return. One said an unmarked team arrived by helicopter, took castings, and left without saying a word. From that moment on, the area was quietly marked off limits by state contractors. Not protected, just ignored. No peer-reviewed study has ever been published about the glyph field, but those early photos still circulate among fringe researchers, and what they show is stunning. Some symbols appear Sumerian, others resemble early Chinese oracle bone script, while a few seem to depict celestial alignments, with stars and crescent shapes linked by curved lines. And yet the symbols are carved using tools no older than the woodland period, meaning the rock is ancient. But the markings are deceptively clean, as if made to look prehistoric. One theory is that it's an elaborate hoax by early settlers or treasure hunters. Another suggests the symbols were carved by a hybrid culture, a now lost group with exposure to both Old World and native traditions. But there's a darker idea too, that the markings are not historical at all, but recent, and part of a coded language never meant to be understood by the public. In 2012, a student from Berea College reportedly hiked to the site and posted grainy images online. Within 48 hours, the photos were pulled. His account went silent. Locals say the trail to the glyphs has since been rerouted by new fencing, and the last known copy of the original survey log was purchased from an estate sale by an anonymous buyer from D.C. The underground drum of Black Hollow Ridge, a pulse beneath the earth. Not far from Harlan County, in a forgotten dip between two wooded hills known as Black Hollow Ridge, locals talk about something they call the drum. It's not a place, at least not in the way you'd expect. It's a sound, a low, deep vibration that rises from the ground in rhythmic pulses, sometimes felt through the soles of your boots, sometimes barely audible like a distant thunder that never quite arrives. People describe it as a heartbeat under the mountain. The first documented mention came in 1909 in a miner's journal archived at the University of Kentucky. He wrote about feeling the ground thrum like a wet drumhead while resting during a solo prospecting trip. He thought it was a cave-in happening far off, but no cave-ins were reported that day. Over the years, multiple geologists, spelunkers, and even military personnel have returned to Black Hollow Ridge to investigate. No known fault lines run through the area. There are no underground water reservoirs or volcanic activity, and yet the pulsing continues, most notably in the spring and fall, and almost always in the early morning hours. Then, in 2003, a group of acoustic researchers from Vanderbilt set up sensitive seismic microphones in the region as part of a low-frequency sonar calibration test. What they picked up stunned them. The pattern wasn't random. It followed a consistent 5-beat cycle, each pulse spaced approximately 13.2 seconds apart, for hours. Even more bizarre, it stopped entirely when people got too close. The team published preliminary data, but the full report was pulled offline within months. They later claimed the project shifted priorities. But locals haven't stopped talking. Hunters, trail riders, and amateur cavers say they can still feel the rhythm, if they're quiet enough. Some believe there's a massive subterranean chamber under the ridge, perhaps a collapsed cavern or ancient burial vault sealed so completely that only vibrations escape. Others connect it to older Cherokee legends that mention the sleeping earth heart, a sacred site said to breathe below the soil, where no roots grow and no animals nest. Satellite imaging has revealed a perfectly symmetrical oval depression in the ridge's center, barely visible to the eye but geometrically flawless. Drones flown over the area show magnetic interference, metal detectors go haywire, and dogs reportedly refuse to cross a certain point on the trail even when coaxed. Is it natural resonance? A trick of limestone layers? Or is it the echo of something engineered, something ancient, still alive in some way, pulsing quietly beneath the Kentucky hills? The hidden geometry of Star Valley, a lost earthwork that reappears only from orbit. In the remote stretches between Jackson and Wolfe counties, there's a patch of rugged land known by locals as Star Valley, a name that appears nowhere on official maps, but shows up in oral history and old mining deeds. To the naked eye, the region seems unremarkable: dense hardwood forest, uneven ridges, and brush-covered hills. But in 2016, while analyzing topographic LiDAR data for erosion mapping, a University of Kentucky grad student noticed something that should not have been there: a massive geometric outline buried beneath centuries of forest growth. What she discovered stunned her advisor: a five-pointed star formation nearly a mile wide, constructed from faintly elevated berms and trenches. The angles were too perfect to be natural. The points of the star aligned precisely with the equinox sunrise, solstice sunset, and three prominent Appalachian constellations used by Cherokee skywatchers. And yet, no official survey or archaeological report had ever mentioned a structure like this. Not in Kentucky, not anywhere in North America. Researchers at first suspected it was a natural drainage pattern, but subsequent drone scans revealed that the elevation shifts were evenly spaced, with sharp inner corners and a perfectly circular boundary enclosing the star, features never produced by erosion. Soil samples showed unusual layering consistent with human-built earthworks. Layers of compressed clay, charcoal, and crushed limestone, not found in surrounding terrain. Carbon testing on nearby burnt wood fragments suggested the site could be over 2,500 years old, dating it to the late Adena or early Hopewell period, cultures not known for such large geometric structures in Kentucky. So why hasn't it been studied? That's the strange part. The moment preliminary images were shared online in 2017, access to the land was suddenly restricted. Ownership had shifted quietly over the years, from a defunct mining company to a shell corporation based in Virginia, and now to a private conservation trust that has since blocked research permits. The reason? Environmental restoration. But researchers note there are no active conservation efforts taking place, just new fencing and trail closures. Satellite imagery after 2020 shows tree clearing in a square perimeter, but no follow-up investigations. Some theorists now suggest that Star Valley may have once been an ancient calendrical site, a vast ceremonial ground used for astronomical tracking or high ritual. Others wonder if it was a burial landscape, with symbolic geometry marking where bodies were interred, aligning human death with the movement of stars. And then there are those who believe it was meant to be seen from above, by something or someone with the power to navigate by shape and shadow. The vanishing monolith of Laurel Creek, a standing stone. No one can find any more. In the dense backcountry near Laurel Creek in southeastern Kentucky, there's a story that refuses to fade, about a solitary stone pillar, more than 10 feet tall, perfectly vertical, and covered in strange markings no one could translate. Locals called it simply the Standing One. For decades, hunters, hikers, and loggers swore they saw it. A few even claimed to have leaned against it or chipped off a piece, only to return later and find nothing there. The first and only confirmed record of the stone appears in a 1932 black-and-white photograph buried deep in the archives of the Kentucky Historical Society. The image shows a tall, tapering monolith partially buried in vines and brush. A man stands beside it for scale, hat off, clearly posed. Beneath the photo, written in pencil, found near L.C. Fork, June 9, 1932. Symbols like bird feet, no camp near. That's it. Researchers have tried to match the stone's markings to known native scripts, but nothing matches. They aren't Cherokee syllabary, they aren't pictographs, and they don't appear to be decorative. They seem to spiral around the stone like a story etched from bottom to top. By the 1950s, stories of the stone took a strange turn. Hikers said it seemed to move, never far, just a few hundred feet, but always to a slightly different position. One hunter claimed it had turned to face the hill between one season and the next. Another said the moss grew differently each time he saw it. Skeptics called it mistaken memory. But no one could explain why the original location, documented in the 1930s photo, now shows nothing but solid forest floor. No stone, no hole, no trace. Some believe it was destroyed by logging crews in the 60s. Others think it was deliberately removed by a team who wanted it gone, perhaps researchers from out of state or even government surveyors who misclassified it. One theory, whispered more than written, claims the monolith was part of a network of ancient markers that once crisscrossed the Appalachian range, pointing toward something long buried or meant to be hidden. An early navigation system, or a warning. But here's what makes the story stay alive. In 2011, a man from Clay County posted to a private Facebook group claiming he'd found the standing one again. This time buried nearly up to its top in soil and leaves, in a hollow far from any road. He uploaded 2 grainy photos. Within a week, his account was deleted. And the photos? Gone. No backups, no reposts. Just silence. Subscribe and click the card on screen.